So for those of you who thought that BC was going to average 50 points per game, that scoring average took a bit of a tumble against the Florida State Seminoles in losing the ACC opener. We bring in Dan Rubin from BC Interruption to talk up the situation at Boston College that speaks to a lot of defense. Unfortunately, a lot of defense when BC's on the field, but also when the opposing defense is on the field, and a quarterback situation that's suddenly in flux. So, Dan, let's start there. We know that Darius Slade broke his ankle. He's out for the season. He wasn't exactly setting the world on fire against FSU, 4 for 12, 47 yards and a pick, but he had the experience from last season and looked to be a running threat and all those things that he brought to the table. So let's start with the Addazio press conference today, what you got out of it, and some of the jewels that you were passing on to me before we hit the record button.
Yeah, Mark, I think I think Coach Addazio might have been a little cranky today in the press conference. He was I listened to some of the audio from it. I wasn't there personally in attendance, but I got to listen to some of the audio, and I've been reading over some of the transcripts and came across a little defiant towards some of the things that either were written or said or asked of him throughout the weekend. Talking about the team, and he said, the defense played great. That's exactly how he opened it, and he opened it up with the standard lines about that the defense statistically was fantastic, did a great job against Florida State, which they did. They held Dalvin Cook to only about 50 yards, held Everett Golson to under 200 yards passing, and held Florida State, who's the number 9 team in the nation, to only 14 points. But the big talk has always been about the offense. We knew the defense was going to be good. At least to start the season. We didn't think they'd be this good, but they are very, very good. And that's kind of been the approach everyone's taken. Now, that said, you come in this week in with what's happened in the Florida State game, and people kind of started questioning him. They questioned the play calling. They questioned Darius Wade. They questioned the offensive line. They questioned a lot of pieces about this entire Boston College offense, and he came out firing at the press conference. He said, the average starting position was the 19-yard line. They played on a long field the whole night. It's not a great place for a young football team. In his exact line, he said, that's contrary to everything that I told you was the plan for us to win. We're starting on the 19-yard line. That's really difficult. Good luck with that. The national average chart says that you have 10 to 13% chance to score a touchdown, and now you're doing it with a young football team with a quarterback with minimal experience. That's just not going to happen against one of the best defenses in the country. And he specifically pointed and said, if you want to say that, good luck with that. That's just not the case. And again, the line where he normally talks about tough, rugged football teams, I think people maybe started to think it was coach speak. And his tone today said, no, this is really what I'm telling you, and this is really the way that it is.
Yeah, so young quarterback, even when Wade was in the lineup, he just being a sophomore, 5 new offensive linemen from our discussions, if I remember that correctly, and limited playmaking ability on the outside. So you go into a game and you know that you've got a defense that can play with just about anybody, and you're in a 7-0 game for most of the game until late. And actually, when you talk about giving up 14 points, there was the scoop recovery for the Florida State defense. So 7 points given up by the defense. The defense played their minds out in this game. So I guess he was waiting for a flip the field kind of play. A runner breaks one, or you get a fumble on the other side and you flip the field one way or the other, or a big return or something.
Yeah, I mean, he specifically pointed to the running backs and said, the offensive line's been taking a beating in media and comment message boards. People have been saying that the offensive line is terrible because the running game is way down. And he said, they're not bad, they're not terrible, they're inconsistent, and that's a collective combination of different things. Where the strength of the team is supposed to be the running backs. And as he put it, right now it's not, and they're not playing at the level they need to be playing at. And he said he's addressed that with the running backs. He said that the offensive line is young and they're inexperienced. And there are times when the team has been blocked perfectly and the team's been blocked the way that it should be. They need to be able on those plays, the running backs, to gather more yards, to go out and get some more different things and even make things happen when the blocking isn't there. And that's just not what's happening for them. Boston College is still in the top 30 in terms of rushing in the nation. But when you're talking about Boston College and a team that does not throw the ball often, and as Coach Addazio said today, they're not going to be throwing the ball often with inexperience at those skill positions. The running game it's almost like they're a victim of their own success when you're saying that 28th best in the nation running isn't acceptable. And you look at the stats and the way that the average rush has been so far down this year. Guys like John Hilleman haven't really been breaking the ball loose the way that you would have expected them to. And, couple that with the passing game having its issues. And it's not a mess. It's a work in progress. And that's what he kind of tried to level set with the media today. It's not a mess. They're not terrible. They're just inconsistent, and they need to get better because it's not acceptable to him, and it might not be the rest of the way.
Dan Rubin joins us from BC Interruption. Dan, I don't know that we can really utilize the national numbers. What do you think? Just because the two opponents to start the season were so inferior, and then you jump up to Florida State in competition, and then there's going to be all sorts of different levels of competition in between that, the Wake Forest and the North Carolina States and all those. But it's Florida State, and then it's
Howard, Maine.
Howard. But you brought up Hilleman. I wanted to ask you about John Hilleman. 8 carries against Florida State for 7 yards. But even looking back at the first 2 games of the season, they ran a ton of guys. A ton of guys got attempts against Florida State. Hilleman again with 8, only 27 in the first 3 games. And I really thought that he was the man.
Yeah, I mean, he's still got the talent, and you keep kind of waiting for him to break out. But last year he played behind what was a tremendous running offensive line. And I think that's where, when you say the offensive line hasn't been terrible, but they've been inconsistent, his number is, number 1 on list of reasons why they've been inconsistent. Boston College played with a backup center, Chris Holmstrom, against Florida State. And they have those new guys who are still kind of trying to get to know each other and gel on the offensive line. And it's taken time. Last year you did have guys who hadn't played together in game situations, but you had guys who had been together on the team. Now you're regressing to youth in addition to the rest of it, guys who are either sophomores, maybe even junior. Harris Williams is a senior in there. But when you have a true freshman playing center, you can't run between the guards. And that's where John Hilleman kind of made his bones last year. When you're running behind Andy Gallick, who's playing in the National Football League right now on one side, and Ian Silberman, who's playing in the National Football League on the left, you can run between the tackle and the center. You can't do that when you have a true freshman at center and a guy with no experience playing on the left side or the right side or wherever they are.
Yeah, those are the 2 most important positions in regards to returning experience. The quarterback obviously runs the show. He needs to understand and execute the offense more so than anyone. Then offensive line, there's more cohesion and working together needed by that unit than any other position on the field. And when you're inexperienced in those 2 spots, it makes it extremely, extremely difficult. So we're going to talk about this defense in a second, but of course we got to set up the quarterback position because that's where it stands. Troy Flutie versus Jeff Smith. Your thoughts about who should start? Well,
it's funny because I was actually one of the people who was probably the biggest anti-Flutie starter at the beginning of the year. I didn't think he was the right fit for the offense. I've always felt that, even watching him scramble in high school, and he broke all these high school records in Massachusetts, that at the college level, he was going to be more of a pocket-style passer. And in the Steve Addazio offense, you need more of a dual threat. I know people look at him and say, well, he was able to run all over the field in high school, and he's got the name, and he's a Flutie, and yeah, he is, but he's more of a drop back style passer. We saw it. He was able to take a 3-step drop and deliver a 3-yard pass on a curl. When he had to run the option, he didn't know when to make the pitch. He held on to the ball on a 4th down conversion. He was tackled before on a 4th and 2 or whatever it was and couldn't get to the stick because he didn't know how to read the line, make the pitch. Maybe it was just the situation he was in, maybe whatever it was. But I like Troy Flutie. I think that he understands the playbook very well for Boston College. I feel that he understands, having spent the year redshirting, how the coaches really want him to play. His other quarterback is Jeff Smith, who's more explosive. I think more physically gifted than Troy Flutie. He's a lot faster. He's going to be a lot more like Tyler Murphy, but he's only an 18-year-old true freshman. It's not a knock against him at all to say, I don't want a freshman, a true freshman at that, starting 4 games into the season with a Northern Illinois team coming to town that just took Ohio State to the limit and the rest of your ACC schedule on the horizon. You know, he did get some reps against Howard, but at the same time, anytime you're talking about a true freshman, he simply hasn't had the time, especially when he didn't gray shirt and he wasn't here in the spring, to have picked up the intricacies of the offense. You know, maybe he's able to pick it up on the fly. I'm not Nostradamus, so I can't, you know, look into the crystal ball and figure that out. But my personal opinion leads to Troy Flutie. That said, I think Jeff Smith gets the first look. Okay,
we were kind of hoping for the Nostradamus take on this, Dan. That's why we bring you on here.
Hey, you know, I try to do it, but all of my predictions so far, I've fanned on at least half of them this year. So I'm swinging like 250 on this year.
250. So you could crack that Red Sox starting lineup. It sounds.
Oh yeah, I'm much better than Hanley Ramirez right now.
I'm going to temper the defensive optimism just a shade because Florida State did struggle the week before against South Florida. They struggled passing the ball. Everett Golson and the receivers not necessarily in sync. The offensive line, surprisingly, because of Florida State getting just about anybody they want, their offensive line really isn't that good in regards to pass blocking. Now, Dalvin Cook, when they got in trouble against South Florida, he was just a man and made some highlight runs to take over that game and basically win the game. And he wasn't able to do that against the Boston College defense. You mentioned 15 carries for 54 yards. One of those a 26-yard carry. So he got shut down. They only passed for 119 yards. You mentioned the Florida State scoop and score on defense, 7 points allowed against an offense that, again, isn't necessarily in sync or where it's probably going to be in a few weeks, but still is loaded with talent. So, man, Harold Landry, I was looking through your numbers here, 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks already. And that Stephen Daniels play that he made when he just crashed the line and just knocked the guard into the backfield was just a thing of beauty and is all over YouTube and social media. And it's a thing of beauty. If you love defensive football, that was just tremendous.
Oh, that was pretty. One good deed deserves another. Everett Golson had delivered a good block that and pancaked and turned the lights out on Kevin Kavalik. And then in return, you get a guy like Stephen Daniels turning out the lights on an offensive lineman. That's good smash mouth football that you like to see, especially out of the Boston College defense, which has been the strength granted in the first 2 games. But when you think about it, and we were all asking the question of how good they could be, they looked really good against Florida State, and that was really encouraging, especially with the offense as what they've termed work in progress. It's great to see the defense play the way that they did.
Dan, I bring you on here for the scouting reports, but I guess I should be delivering the scouting report to you because I was in Ohio Stadium on Saturday afternoon for the Northern Illinois game, and I can tell you that this kid who plays quarterback, 26 touchdowns, 2 interceptions coming into the game for his career. Drew Hare has been extremely efficient. Obviously, by those numbers, he couldn't stand up against the pass rush. The Ohio State pass rush won that game. They were devastating. So Northern Illinois, outside of one short drive, scoring a touchdown, couldn't do anything the entire game. But their defense was along the line of scrimmage, holding its own against Ohio State's offensive line that brings back 4 of 5 starters from the national championship team. Ezekiel Elliott got a hard-earned 100 yards. Like, I'm talking like barely 4 yards a carry, 100 yards. That Northern Illinois defense picked off 3 passes. We know the quarterback situation at Ohio State and the talent that they have and the playmakers. They don't know who to give the ball to because they supposedly have too many playmakers in Northern Illinois. They didn't budge. They looked rock solid on defense. And again, I think offensively, they have some playmakers and they have a very experienced veteran quarterback. I think it was Ohio State's defensive line that just dominated the game, and that's why they won the game. The front 7 was just too much. But it's a team to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and after what happened last year when Colorado State came into Chestnut Hill and beat Boston College, we as fans, as media people, however they want to deem us, we have really looked at any particular game and said, this is going to be a tough game. And right from the beginning, you knew that Northern Illinois, they're not coming in by accident with maybe a chance to shock you. They're a very good team. Steve Addazio called them an elite MAC team, which to him equates to a middle road Power 5 team. They could probably step into a Power 5 team conference and be good. I don't remember the last time that they didn't win 10 games in a season. Personally speaking, I know they crashed the BCS and lost in the Orange Bowl a couple of years ago. They're a very good team, and they're a team that's always seemed to beat Power 5 teams in the Big Ten, especially the last couple of years, or in the Big 12 or the SEC or wherever it is that they wind up. And what you hope if you're Boston College is that Drew Hare doesn't come out and sling it and carve up the defense, because he appears, at least in film, and to be a little bit more seasoned throwing the ball in the offense than Everett Golson is in the Florida State offense. And if they're going to rely on him, good Lord willing for Boston College, that defensive line, which has been so good, can get to him and rattle him a little bit, because that's a guy that you just can't give time to against a young secondary that did well against Florida State. They looked really good at times. But, it's all predicated on the fact that you're still able to rattle the quarterback's cage with the front seven.
And that's the similarity. Ohio State's front seven, Boston College strong at the front seven, and maybe that can be the difference, because he was literally just running for his life. But he came in 78% completion percentage and doing all the right things to produce points. But that was the difference in that game. Dan Rubin from BC Interruption talking up the BC Eagles with a new quarterback in play against Northern Illinois. Dan, thanks for the time.
Hey, absolutely.